So yeah, let's get started. Product update. Maybe on the next slide we'll see a little bit of the planning. Of course, as always, ask questions. You can type questions in the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A thing. You can type the questions there. We'll handle them all at the end. I'll save them up and present them to Sean in the end. But just send them in anyway, and we can see if you see something that we don't, if we're missing anything. We also got some polls already. Well, one poll with 2 questions, I believe. We can start that poll, and we would appreciate that if you could answer those questions. It's just some feedback to us. You should see them on your screen right now. You can answer them anytime you want. And
yeah, they're just related to the topics in the webinar.
Yeah, so this is a little spoiler of what we're going to get.
Speaking of spoiler.
And there we go, the agenda. What's on the agenda for us, Sean?
Well, this is a product update. So this is a webinar specifically about the 2023.12 release, and what new features and capabilities are in this release. So as always with these webinars, I like to do some demos, mostly demos, and very few slide content, but I'm going to show sort of 3 groups of demos, and then after each demo, I'll do a sort of a little recap of what it is we saw and how it works and all that. Then maybe at the end, we talk a little bit about what's on the roadmap for this year at Servoy, and then of course we'll take time for your questions on anything that you saw or we discussed. So please use the questions feature in Zoom to ask at any point in the webinar, and we promise to get to it.
Sounds good.
So for the first demo or group of demos, we'll be talking about security, and specifically there was, maybe you saw in the release notes, the addition of a feature that we're calling stateless login form, which maybe requires a little bit of explanation there. It also comes with the integration with also new features in ServoyCloud, and that's sort of an identity access management platform capability in ServoyCloud, and integrating how does a developer integrate with that. So we'll kind of go through some demos there and explain each of the components of that, and we'll do a quick overview and talk about why we're doing this feature and how it works. So I'll pause there and I'll jump into demo number 1. So I'm going to switch over to the IDE. Victor, can you confirm for me that you can see Servoy Developer?
Yes, now I can.
Yes. Okay, good. Yes, so this is a product update, but maybe it helps to do a quick little review of sort of how security, and that by that I mean authentication and enforcement of application permissions kind of works, and then what's new and what's different. So here in my little Hello World application, when I highlight the node in the Solution Explorer here, you can see there's a new property here called Authenticator. There is a property that used to be there for many years called Must Authenticate. So that's sort of gone, because if you set this to something other than none, then it sort of shows that you're requiring authentication. So we'll come back to this in a minute, but that's one change to be aware of. And then the other change is actually in the .9 release of last year, we did a small refactor. We renamed users and groups to users and permissions. And that is because the word group was kind of, I think, inadequate or wrong. What we're really talking about here are actual permissions in the application. So none of this has changed here. It's just that it's been renamed. Also in the security API down here, we deprecated anything that references group. It will still run, but it's hidden and deprecated. You should switch that to permission. So for example, if the current user has a permission, right, then it doesn't say has group or belongs to group anymore. It's renamed to has permission. So that's an API change as well to be aware of. So that part doesn't really change. If you're new to Servoy and you haven't got into permissions, this is where a developer can define an application permission, and then that can be tied to that can be enforced in the application, and that's in two areas, in the user interface, but also at the data layer, and I'll show a little bit of that in the demo. And then you can also programmatically check if the user has permission. But that's been renamed, but we'll come back to this in a minute. Going back to the authenticator, what's new here are the values that you can put in here. With none, your application launches with no login, and there's no opportunity to determine who the user is or enforce permissions. Default is, if you switch to default, it will show the new stateless login form by default, and it will use the built-in or the repository-based user authentication. So again, if you're defining your users in the users and permissions editor here, then you will be authenticating these users. These users are actually stored in the repository database based user or identity management system. So that none of that is new, but that's sort of the original built-in security. Many people do not use that because they want to do something more custom or advanced. But that's simply like the equivalent of having the must authenticate checkbox from before. When you choose this, you will be presented a login form, and it is the stateless login form, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. So let's just go ahead and leave that there. And I'm going to launch the NG client, and I have to, of course, switch my screen share back to my browser. Victor, can you confirm that you can see the login screen on my browser?
I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, so this is essentially the default login form that you get. Not a big deal. It looks a little bit different than the old default login form. The difference here is when we say that it's stateless is that this login screen doesn't initialize a client session. And that's important for one reason. We get sometimes the report that an application server has, a lot of concurrent sessions or concurrent users, and actually that's a bunch of browser tabs where the user is logged out and they just sitting on the login screen. They're not doing anything. And so they are stateful client sessions, so it is consuming resources on the application server. So one of the reasons we have this so-called stateless login form is to just make a lightweight authentication, so that when you're sitting on the login screen, you're not consuming any resources on the server. This is just a static page that sits in front of everything. So that's kind of step one of this. If you choose default, then this will use the repository-based user authentication. I'm going to switch back to the IDE now. By the way, if you are using a login form, so that would be this property here. This hasn't changed. If you select default and then choose login form, it will defer to your login form. It will be a stateful solution then, right? So we're not taking away anything here. If you have already a login form and you authenticate through your own database or LDAP or something else that you like, none of that changes. You just leave your login form there, but you will have a stateful session. You won't be able to take advantage of that stateless login form. Okay, so then the next part to show here will be the authenticator that's based on ServoyCloud. For that, I'm going to switch over to my browser again and to the ServoyCloud Control Center. And here I have defined my application Hello World. This application is the same application that we see in the IDE. They are connected. The IDE is connected to my cloud environment and can be aware of the security schema that I set up here. So first thing to note is that an application has permissions, just like in the IDE. I have permissions here. In fact, your permissions are under source control. So when you commit to the repository and you build through ServoyCloud, it'll actually sync these permissions. So if you're using ServoyCloud for your application building and testing, then it will pick up your permissions. You can also define them here in ServoyCloud as well, like this one here with the description I defined here, but the other ones were synced from source. So that's because permissions are tied to an application, and they mean something inside the application with what you can do. Beyond that, we have the security tab, and here we have user management. So you can see here I have created, excuse me, a few users. If I click create user, I get the dialog. I could add another user here, and it would invite them, send a verification email. And if I look in detail at this particular user, you can see that I can see his roles belongs to this basic user role, and permissions are grouped into roles. So these are all the permissions that he would inherit from his roles. I also can see the login history, right? So a bit of sort of identity access management platform here coming into ServoyCloud with respect to user management. If I come in here to roles, I can view the roles that I have in my platform. Now, roles are something you can do across your organization. You can have multiple applications. Each application has its own permission sets, but you can group them into roles however you like here. So if I go and look at the power users details, you can see that I can add permissions and choose them from my applications and bring them in that way. Oh, my Zoom stuff is in the way.
No, we don't see that, Sean. Looks
Yeah,
good to us.
I have to keep dragging these the toolbars around when I
Yeah.
want to see stuff and click on stuff. And then finally, I can see which users have this role. And right now, there's no users, but we'll come back to this and change that. Okay, so let's switch back to the IDE and show how this plays out. So what I'm going to do in the IDE is I'm going to set my authenticator to ServoyCloud. And now when I launch the application, it will still show that stateless login screen. It's the same screen, but it will use a different authenticator source. I have to switch back to my browser. Okay, so now I get the same login screen, and I'm going to use that user that I had added to my organization and log him in. And now I get my Hello World application. I put a few buttons on here to show some of the integrations here. So first of all, I want to print out the security info. And this just tells me the username and the permissions that that user has. And of course, I have something here like create an order. But when I go to click on it, it says, sorry, access denied. Right, so
And
the...
Do you get that security info from just the regular security API? There's a function for that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll go back into the IDE and show how it integrates.
Okay.
So if I switch back to the IDE and come into my form here. So first thing we did was print the security info. The method that's attached to that, let me make some space here, is here. And to your question, Victor, so I just called the security API that's been there forever in Servoy Developer, and get username. That's the currently logged in user, and then I get the user permissions. And the second column is the name, right? So then I just sort of print that out to the screen. So I authenticated through ServoyCloud. That's my authentication source. And I retrieve the permission info from that. That all happens automatically for you. There's no coding involved for that. That happens via that login screen. And then the applications, the user permissions are known at that time as they're defined in the back end. You also saw that when I tried to create an order, I also used the same security API that's been there, excuse me, from the beginning. And I checked to see if the user has this permission, can create orders. Again, that's something that's I've defined in my application. It's under source control. It's part of my application. And because the user doesn't have that, I showed this dialog, right? Now, something you can do as well, that, well, longtime Servoy users will know this, that there's in the UI, you can enforce your permissions there, right? So I could say that on this form that you have to have the can create orders permission to be able to click on this button. So if you don't have it, I think it's actually this one. I turn that off for the other two. So you really need this one, right? And I save that. And now if I go ahead and I launch this again, and of course I have to switch my screen sharing. I have to log out. One thing that I'll point out here is that that remember me checkbox that's on the stateless login form, that actually does push something to local storage to remember you until you actually log out. So you will stay logged in. That's something that people have built themselves. It's not hard to do, but it's just kind of nice that it's built in and you have the option to show that. So now when I log out and log back in as this guy.
This guy being you.
Yeah. You can see now the button's grayed out, right? I can't even click on it and get that dialog. So that's, and I just wanted to show that because that's, although we're showing some new stuff with the integration with the ServoyCloud Identity Access Management, that this has always worked this way, that you can set application permissions and say what they do. You could also do this on the table level, whether or not you can insert, update, delete, if you turn on audit log for different users, et cetera. That's all works the same and is enforced once you log in.
Can you show once again where to find that window to set the permissions and the functions?
In ServoyCloud?
In the developer.
In the developer, yeah.
Sorry for making you switch again.
No, that's fine. I should be faster at this. Good. Okay, so in the IDE and the Solution Explorer, it's here, users and permissions. You double click that. This is where you can define your application permissions. They're just a named list. And then on that form, here rather, normally you're on the design view. There's across the bottom here, there's these tabs. And if you click the security tab, sorry, I didn't say that the last time I did it. Then you get a list of the form itself and all the elements, and you can say whether it's visible or accessible per permission. And there's some, we did another webinar on this a while back. So if you look at our archives, we go into like some of this stuff as well, but you can say there's no rights on this form unless you grant them, right? So it's a more restrictive, like you start with nothing and then you have to grant it. And you can do that on database tables as well for insert, update, delete, read, etc.
Okay, nice, thanks.
Okay, so now just to sort of show this in a bit more detail, I'm going to go back to my definition here of this role, power users, and you can see that power users did have the permission granted to can create orders for my Hello World application, right? However, there's no users that have this, so I'm going to add this user to that role. So now you can see that he's there. And I shouldn't really need to do anything else other than probably log out And now when I log back in, you can see that the button is enabled, and if I click it, then it says the order was created, right? So I didn't have to make a code change, and this highlights one of the reasons why we offer this, is that we believe that using separating user management and access control from the actual source code is a good thing. That's kind of the modern way to do it. Lots of people are using third parties to authenticate, to manage identities, to manage permissions even. So we wanted to offer that as well. And it's a bit awkward, I think, if you're defining users. You can do it the old-fashioned way in the IDE and add users there, and it syncs it to the repository. But really, that's like under source control, and then you have to sync it when you deploy it, right? So it's a little bit awkward to manage that through, like, as a developer. It makes a lot more sense that you just have like a single source of identity management and access management to do that. So that's kind of the other reason that we wanted to offer this feature, and it's pretty easy to use in your ServoyCloud account and map it to your applications. And that can work for any applications you have registered there. Moreover, you don't have to host the application as well. Yeah, so let me, while I'm talking, I might as well bring up the overview here that helps me remember what else to tell you about this. So we saw that you make permissions under revision control in source. You can manage users and roles in ServoyCloud. The old ways to do it, so using a stateful login form is still supported. Oh, I didn't show the authenticator option for a solution authenticator, but there was another option under that authenticator setting that you can use a solution. So if you want to have full data access in like a module, you can include an authenticator module, and it will pick that up. So that works the same as login solution before. So those are still supported if you want to use that. But if you do want to use the ServoyCloud as your identity access management source, you just set the authenticator type in your solution to ServoyCloud. Oh, and I didn't show customizing the stateless login form. So let's jump back to that as well. So I have to jump to developer.
This just came in as a question as you said it. How to customize the login page.
Yeah,
Still great timing.
One of the reasons I always have a review slide is because I kind of want to make sure I didn't forget anything. Yeah, the way you do that is under the media node here. If you right click it, there's a new option to create a media login page. And that essentially creates this static HTML file, which is basically the thing we just saw. So if you do that and you don't change anything here, you get the same screen. Let me make a few changes here. You remember the login button was green. I'm going to put it to the, so we have the style class defined up here. The button background, I'll change that to the dark blue, and yeah, maybe I want to lighten the background color of the input fields. So let me paste something in for that here. Right, so just a small change, but now if I launch that again and I switch
you
over
forgot a semicolon, I think.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I have to switch back here. Oh yeah, I did. Okay. Now if I,
yeah, CSS is tough on you.
yeah. Yeah, so it's not like designing a form in Servoy, but the whole point is that it's supposed to be lightweight and stateless, right? We don't want to launch a solution. But so here now you see the fields are lightened, and the button has changed. So you can do whatever you want there. A few things have to remain the same. It's covered in the documentation, but you got to have these input fields and a submit. But you can put your own logo. You can put your own background image, etc. Right? So fully customizable there. And that's all you do to customize it. That goes under revision controls. So the moment you deploy that, then it'll be in your WAR file or in ServoyCloud or in your Docker image. Okay, so I think that covers everything for that demo. And again, I want to talk about the roadmap too. What we envision next for kind of this direction. So first of all, you'll notice that login screen didn't have a forgot password. So we're looking into adding a forgot password flow. Again, the idea is that this is kind of just inspired by the other IAM platforms out there. They have these flows all figured out, and you just configure them. You don't code them. So we want to make this part of the Servoy developer experience more of a no-code thing where you just configure your flows and it just works. You don't have to write code for what happens when a user forgets a password or different error messages when they log in, etc. So we will look into additional flows or alternative flows for authentication. The other thing that we want to support, again, Servoy is meant to be for developers to have flexibility, and we're offering a user management system for convenience, but we understand that you may have your users in another IAM, or you want to use a social identity management like a Google account or a GitHub account or something, right? So if there's interest, we're looking next to add a different authentication source to that, so that you could use your own LDAP, for example, or you could let your users log in with their GitHub ID, etc. Something that's already built into ServoyCloud for users of ServoyCloud, but that we want to expose to actually in applications would be multi-factor authentication. And then we can start to add all the cyber features as well, like password rules and histories, or flagging passwords that have been compromised on the dark web, etc. Right? It's the kind of thing that you can do when you start to put user management into an actual platform and not do it in code. You can sort of centralize and offer best practices. So we'll allow you to lock users, unlock them, etc. And all of that would just be, without it would just be through the ServoyCloud screens. You can log out of all devices, that sort of thing. So we're just looking at best practices on identity access management platforms and sort of adapting those to what we think fits our customers. But of course, we'd like to hear from you. So what features would you like in this area? What ideas does this give you? So please let us know, either in this webinar or on the forum or with a direct email. Let's go to the next demo. So I want to show a little bit of the experiments and the features that we're doing in the world of AI and the quick developing technologies in language models and machine learning. So for that, I'm going to first jump into the IDE.
Before we start, maybe Sean, I want to check if everyone has received the poll. All the way at the start, we opened a poll for everyone, but I see we have some new attendees since then. In the bottom of the screen, there's a button with polls, and I think if you haven't answered them, you can open that and answer it for us, because it's just some feedback to us what you do with security and with what you think of the AI that Sean will show you right now. So if everyone could answer that, then that would be really great.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, the first thing is I'm going to go into just a form with some code in it to show this next demo. So at Servoy, as soon as we could get our hands on some of the APIs around the large language models that have been really developing quickly over the past year or so, we have a dedicated team, like a breakout team that's really been experimenting with this and getting smart in all the different aspects of the technologies and the different providers. And we're trying to sort of do some experiments and weave that into our product in different ways. So the first way I'm going to show you is the ServoyAI code assistant. So if here I'm going to select some code that I have, and I'm going to right click, and you see the menu item ServoyAI, and I'm going to ask to debug my method here. Now, this could take a little bit, so I'm going to let it run because it can take a few seconds. I'm going to start another demo, and then we're going to come back. But basically, I'm just saying, hey, I'm having trouble with this code. Analyze it and tell me what you think. So the next thing I'll do is switch back over to my browser and come back into ServoyCloud. And I have down here get help. And I have chat support here. And I'm going to just say, show me an example of how to loop over records and get a total amount, something like that. And I'm going to send that. That should come back a little quicker, and then we'll start a third demo. Oh, geez, demo-itis. Show me an example of how to loop over records and get a total amount. I have to maybe ask it a different way. Let me see. I had something that I copied and pasted. Let me try that.
It's typical for a live demo.
Yeah, I tried this
the
morning,
AI has stage fright, I think.
Well, you know, these things, they don't give you the same answer twice, it seems.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. So here you can see, and the formatting on this is not great. It's something we're gonna fix. But I wanted to show this to you. So it says you can loop over a found set and calculate the total value. And it tells you about, you know, the get size method and kind of how to loop over a found set. But you also notice that it creates the variable at the beginning, and then it you know, does a plus equals here to append to that through the loop, right? So you know, it got it right. So some of these things it gets it pretty well, and others you get not such a great answer, but we allow you to say whether or not it worked, and we do some reinforcement learning on that. But this is another area that we're exploring is can we take the knowledge base of Servoy and kind of make it easier to discover answers. And so we think this will improve quite a bit as the technology improves and as our understanding of how to use it also improves. Then the third demo I want to start, and then I'll go back to the first one, is what we're doing in ServoyCloud. So I'm going to come to one of the applications. So this is actually the namespace for ServoyCloud. So we built ServoyCloud in Servoy, and we build it and host it and manage it in ServoyCloud. So we're really eating our own dog food here. So the application Cloud Sync is like this pretty impressive, complex application that manages a lot of the workloads for building test automation, building applications, deploying all of the automation that goes into ServoyCloud is in this one application. And if I look at the environments here, I have a production environment and a development environment. This one has 38 users. I think these are all robots. They're all headless clients that are doing batch operations. But the reason I want to show this is that you can see that when I look at the environment, that I have query performance here. This has been in ServoyCloud for a number of releases, but we started to look at like, you know, how can we first of all, show any potential problems, you know, and flag them so a user could take action. But then, yeah, you get to here and you're like, okay, I have this 46-second query that is running 880 times in the last hour. So what can I do about it, right? So that was the next thing we want to answer. And here, if I show more and click my little robot guy here, it says ask ServoyAI for help. And this one can also take a while, so I'm going to start this. But here we really analyze not just the query, but it takes some information about the database schema, indexes, etc., and really analyzes it. So it can take a few minutes. or a minute or so. In the meantime, back to demo number 1. And if I sort of maximize this window, you can see that I get an analysis here, and it says infinite loop creation, and it says the code snippet is creating a new record inside the loop that it iterates over the found set. So I did that on purpose. I called new record inside the loop, and it says it's likely to increase the size, and it will cause the loop to never terminate because it will keep getting bigger. So pretty good. The AI figured out that that was going to cause a problem right away, and understood enough about JavaScript and Servoy and my code to get that right. If you look at this, I call new record right in the middle of the loop, and that loop will never end. So this is kind of maybe not something you're going to do on all the time, but if you're having some trouble, you could right click and get some help here. We also think that this is something that we can keep exploring and get better with time. The other thing is the user interface here. We'd like to do something that's a lot more integrated into the code editor, so that you could actually get like maybe a code snippet to fix it and merge it. So looking more like some of the Copilot type features that are out there. But that's one example of doing some AI on your code in the IDE. I think that's the most impressive one, but if you look at the other options here, you could also add inline comments or just ask it to explain something. Like if you were looking at someone else's code, or you downloaded a module, you can highlight the code and ask it to explain something. There are limitations on this as well. If you know much about these large language models, that there's a limit to the number of tokens or words that you can send in. What we do under the hood here is we actually extract a lot of our own information and send that in along with the prompt. So if you were to select like a whole page, you might not get it might be too big to respond to, but these are some areas that we'll have to continue to explore. Let's switch back to our query analyzer and see how it's
Everyone's
doing.
been waiting for those results.
Yes.
Ooh.
So here you can see that we get a response here. I have to say that this is probably the area where you get the most impressive response. And that's, I think, because these language models really understand relational databases and SQL, and that's something that they're well trained on. So this is not specific to Servoy or to a domain of an application. And I think because of that, you get a nice response. And here it's telling you that there's an unnecessary cast, and you could remove that, and it gives you kind of an optimized view of the query. And in our display here, you can copy any code snippets that you see. But essentially, it'll tell you to do things like create indexes or change your query or something like that, right? So again, our goal here is to start to do things, especially in ServoyCloud, where rather than just say you have a performance problem, or you have a bad query, or you have an error in your log, but it's more like what should you do about it, right? It's not just showing you problems, but it's giving you solutions. So that is demo number 2. And maybe I'll do, again, a quick overview about what we saw. So how does it work? Well, I won't get too much into how it works, but what we're using here is really a mix of different technologies for different areas. Perhaps the simplest one you saw was when I just ask a question about how to do something on the help window, the chat interface. And that's using our new documentation site, and with vector embeddings of what's in the documentation, it can pretty much match if it finds something that's known in the documentation. It can kind of match what you're looking for, and then it can route that through a language model to give you a nicely worded response, right? So that's a little bit predicated that we have documentation supporting what it is you're asking about, and sometimes with those you get a misfire, like what we saw When I ask it one way, I didn't get a result, but I ask it a slightly different way, and I do get a result. So again, depending on how these models are tempered, you get more or less creative results. But that's something we can improve on in the future. In the IDE, this is where our R&D team has spent a lot of time researching, actually fine-tuning a language model to get it smarter about Servoy technology, right? So we give it spec files, we give it Java code, or some summaries of Java code to tune it up so that it really understands, like what I said, like found set, get size, found set new record, the things that it analyzed. It knows what those mean because they're not by default trained on our own technology, right? So we had to do that ourselves, and we learned quite a bit about these models along the way. Something else that we're doing is what's called prompt engineering, but it's really just kind of tweaking what you send into these models to get a better response. You saw that on the database analyzer that we don't just say what's wrong with this query. We actually give it a bunch of extra information like the schema or the indexes, and then it takes all of that into account. So we've gone through some trial and error to see what kinds of prompts give the best result for that. So that's another area where as we ask it different questions to analyze different things, for example, we have to also kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. We did quite a bit of that on the query analyzer. And finally, user reinforcement learning. The more these are used, the more you guys use them, and the more we test them, the better they get, right? So it may be inconsistent, or some things are not that impressive at first, but they only get better. They only go in one direction. So that gives me confidence. On our roadmap, we're already doing some things with log analysis, particularly what runs in ServoyCloud for customers that run applications in our cloud. We can harvest those log files and start to understand more things about what happens in Servoy applications. And we can start to do some kind of application analytics on the way applications run, right? So that's one area, is just improving what we can see from our cloud and what features we can offer on top of that. So I think we'll see more development in that area. Something I think that is also interesting is using AI to understand more about your application, right? So we saw a little bit of that when I sent the snippet of the source code, but what if an AI could ingest like your whole solution, right? All of the metadata that goes with that, and you could say, I don't know, like make a form that does this, or create a calculation that does that, right? It would understand first the Servoy technology, but then also understand your solution and be able to do some generative stuff in your application. But I think those first 2 points are more like, how can we use this to improve our product and to make it sort of serve our mission, which is to make business application development easier and more powerful to build better applications. But I think the holy grail is also, how do we do AI enablement in the applications that are built in Servoy? And so that's something that we're curious about and we'll be exploring. And I think it helps if we talk to customers and understand what their use cases are. And we have had some conversations, and we're looking to do some proof of concepts around this, where we can say, yeah, Servoy can help your application to take advantage of these same technologies, not just improve our own product, but let you improve your products. So that's kind of on our roadmap and what we're thinking about in this area. Okay, so that's that one. Final demo, and this one should be a bit shorter. Just an update on what's new in ServoyCloud, apart from what I just showed. Again, we also are releasing ServoyCloud on sort of a quarterly cadence along with the core developer product. So I want to show the log activity viewer, which is a more enhanced view of log files, a bit of the monitoring we're doing on databases, and then a teaser on our end-to-end testing capabilities. So let's jump into that. And for this one, I don't have to switch to the IDE. anymore. I'm gonna take the same namespace here, the one that's actually running ServoyCloud, and look at, well, I'll look at the same application here, in the production environment. And here, if I look at the log activity, get a bit of a warning on what needs attention. I've already filtered this to show errors, and you can see there's a few errors here. One thing that we're offering here now is that if you know, I should actually show, I think I had a tab open here. This is what the log file looks like on the application server admin page. And I've always thought that this is pretty brutal. Like, you get a stack trace, good luck with that, right? And then people who get more experience, they kind of learn what these mean, or they post on the forum, or they send a support ticket in. I'm having this problem. Oh, send me your log. Here's what I see my log, right? I always wanted this to be that this stuff gets hidden, and that the product itself can tell you what your problems are and how to fix them. So we're getting closer to that with this view. Of course, we want to capture the raw log file. But here, if I show more info about this log, you can see that it shows the log message, but it also is able to identify exactly where that's bubbling out from my source code, right? And so this is one area where we can see an improvement. Like, okay, it's having this problem, but it's also happening right here when I call this line of code. And so you can go in and troubleshoot your own code there. I think this is just the beginning. We can probably make this a lot smarter, but it's one nice area that we added in ServoyCloud in this release. And you can also toggle on and off the stack trace, right? I think the stack trace is not so useful to look at, and it's pretty intimidating when you see all this, like, stuff here. The other thing is that you can truncate the response as well, right? So by default, we truncate it, we kind of hide the stack trace, and we show you what may be relevant, which is where the problem is in your code. The other thing I was going to say about this is that we think that there's two kinds of log messages. One is a problem that originates in your code, right? Like you do something that throws an error and it originates in your source code. And there's also stuff that just happens as the application's running that's maybe deeper in the stack, right? And those, I think, are the ones that are most intimidating, because, like, they mean something, but you don't really know what to do about them. So the other area that I can't really demo this, but that we're looking at is, like I said before, we're harvesting log files for applications that run in our cloud, and we're sort of codifying them and categorizing them to be able to then in the future suggest, like, what you might do to fix it, right? So that ideally this view kind of over time changes from like a bunch of technical stuff to like, yeah, you have this problem, maybe you want to do this, and the kind of the same approach we're taking with the query analyzer there. Like, what can I do about it? So that's one area that we'll we'd like to improve on. Another thing that's just new that I want to highlight, if I go to this application, sorry, the environments, and I look at the production environment here, I have one database. Now we have a database stats view, so we can start to look at some statistics on that database, cache hit rates and read stats. You can see the different kinds of reads that you can turn on and off here, and you can filter this by time. Again, this is, I think, in the same department as log files, where we want to start to identify what we think is, could be a problem, and bring that to your attention and what to do about it, and not make you look at, statistics. I don't think that anyone really wants that, but this is a start, and I think we'll be able to improve that, similar to what we have in the environments view here, where, we started to show things in system health, like if RAM gets up over a certain threshold, we're automatically taking heap dumps, or if CPUs get up over a certain threshold, we're automatically taking stack dumps and sending those off for analysis. So the whole idea is to become more proactive on things that are happening in a particular environment. So the last thing I wanted to show was on the testing side, and that is a pre-recorded little video that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. What we're looking at here is Cypress Studio. Cypress is a test automation tool. It's a pure JavaScript implementation of test automation. And we've had test automation in ServoyCloud for a long time. However, the project that we used, which was open source, became deprecated. So we're looking for an alternative. Excuse me. But also we've always been looking for like a test recorder. So this is a test recorder in Cypress Studio that you can run locally. And so I'll just let this play here. You can see that here you're choosing a URL. So this could be your local host solution, or you could point it to a hosted solution somewhere and say, okay, I'm going to use that to record commands. And as the user's moving along here, you can add assertion statements. So here the user is asserting that the login screen is visible, basically, and you can see that it's, that it has text, and you choose login, right? So that's one thing that just says, hey, the login screen showed. Now, as the user's entering into the fields, it's recording that the user did an input on this element with this value, and the next element with the next value, and they click this button, and that creates a test command the whole way. Again, on the next page, maybe just add another assertion that the welcome page showed, and save that to a file, right? So now we're able to play that back, and you can see it, well, played very quickly. And this goes into one of these, I'll pause here, one of these Cypress.js files. So it's a single test spec. And you can see the JavaScript that gets generated to play back the test, right? The nice thing about this is that this is a third-party tool that works really well, and we've adapted ServoyCloud to automate Cypress tests. So if you do test automation and you put these files under revision control, that when you commit them, or you make a commit back to your repository, the ServoyCloud build automation, you can configure it for test automation, and it'll just run your tests for you and generate the reports. So that's a really nice teaser here. We expect this to be ready pretty soon. We're just making some final tweaks to it, and we may add some features around the assertions that you can do. Maybe there's some enhancements we can add, but we wanted to show this to you because, yeah.
I'm not too good with testing, but can you one time repeat or summarize in really basic terms for me what this can do for me?
Maybe I'll just jump to the overview slide. So
that works.
Yeah, so essentially what we saw is that we took the Cypress Studio, we pointed it to a running Servoy application. It could be local, or it could be in the cloud or something. While we're running the application, we can click in the studio, like on the screen, and add these assert statements, like did the login screen show, or was the value in the field this, et cetera, right? Like any test has assertions, things that should be true. And then it also records all of the clicks that you made, right? So I type in this field, I click this button, and it writes those to that test file. If that's under revision control, then it will automatically run those tests for you in ServoyCloud. So we've always wanted to have a recorder for the test automation part of ServoyCloud, and now with Cypress Studio, we have that recorder. So we've adapted ServoyCloud to be able to run those tests. Does that?
Wow, yeah, that's
amazing.
Help,
Victor?
Yes.
Yeah, and then so again, we expect this to be, we're still tweaking it, but I wanted to give you a teaser. So hopefully in the next release, and then we'd like to make ServoyCloud as a whole more self-service, more monitoring and analytics, and something else that that's coming up is we're updating the integrated project case management system that comes with it there for tracking, agile development. So that's kind of on the roadmap there. I think we're coming up on the hour, and my throat's getting scratchy.
Yeah, we have two more minutes if we want to stay within the time box. Yeah.
All right. So one announcement that I want to make here, that 2024.3, the upcoming release, will be the last release that will support the Smart Client and the Web Client, the two long-time legacy client types in Servoy. So what that means is that release will include support for those. And then when we build the long-term supports, we always build them on the Q1 release, the .3 release. So if you're running those client types, you'll have a 2-year runway after that on the long-term support branch. So they'll continue to receive maintenance support on those branches for 2 years after that. But you would, for example, if you went to 2024.6, you wouldn't run Smart Client or Web Client on that. You would just stay on .3 and then get the LTS updates. So that's an important announcement. And yeah, in 2024, we want to focus more on the developer community with documentation, knowledge sharing, templates, more webinars. We've taken that as feedback from you guys, and we're going to be investing in ServoyCloud and in ServoyAI in this year. So let's jump to the questions, Victor.
Yeah, where shall we start? Shall we start with the AI questions first?
Sure.
So the first one that I really liked is, how much do we at Servoy use ServoyAI?
How much do we? I have to, well, ServoyAI, I have to admit, I'm using ChatGPT Plus a lot for work, just to do dumb stuff faster. So I really like that. The other thing that I've been using personally are custom GPTs, which is another area we're going to be exploring. So these are GPTs that you can sort of kind of train yourself without having to know much about training them, like fine tuning and model training. So I've been experimenting with feeding it documentation and forum posts, and like it can scrape the forum and scrape the release notes and be up to date. So it used to be these things were like out of date after 2021. So it could be that like the chat support that we saw uses a custom GPT instead of vector embeddings on documentation. The results from that could be a lot better. So I personally am using it a lot. I'm kind of excited about it, cautiously excited about it. And yeah, we're using it. I know some of our developers, I've seen them using like the code, not the ServoyAI itself, but using, what do you call it? Copilot-like features, developing as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that's coming that we have to absorb and see what we do with it.
It's growing on me as well. And another question is, so we've had this before, but what happens with the privacy of the AI? Will the code that's being analyzed being sent anywhere? What happens if you analyze your data model, for example? That's
a good question. There is a waiver or not a waiver, what do you say? A consent that you agree to, that, because if you select your source code and then send it to be analyzed, you are sending potentially proprietary stuff to a third party, right? We route some of this through things like OpenAI, although we're sort of LLM agnostic. We can change at any point, but yeah, it could go to a third party, so you should understand that.
It's a good little asterisk while using it.
And nobody really knows what that means right now. It's just kind of a.
Well, that's something we have to figure out as well along the way, and how we can minimize the risk. So those were the AI questions. Then going back all the way to the first part about Servoy security, what happens with the old Servoy security module, the one that you import into your solution, and how do you migrate?
Yeah. So that is the SVY security module. Well,
Yes.
so I'm glad that question was asked, because I meant to mention that a bit more in the overview. So the SVY security module is still worth using, in particular for multi-tenant scenarios. The reason that we have that we're offering the cloud-based security is that SVY security is used by a lot of people who maybe don't need it, right? And then you still have to include a module and extend a login form, and right, it's a developer activity to get authentication working. And I think, Victor, you and I had a conversation like a year ago where you were working with a customer and they were like surprised they had to do all this just to like, they want to add users and set their permissions and be done with it, right? And they don't want to do that in development. You want to do it as like an administrative function. So that's kind of the main reason that we're offering, one of the main reasons we're offering that. So the SUI security module is still worth using, I think, for if you have cases where you have different organizations and they maybe have their roles configured differently. If you want to allow your end users to do security-like things in your application, right? So if you have an application like a product and you're a software vendor and you want to, have the security management be part of your product, then probably the SUI security module is still a good way to go. We may put some of that onto the roadmap of what we're doing, but for now, this is more for like managing a single org and users and roles and authentication for that org.
Okay,
that makes sense.
And how would that then work if you're not using something like the ServoyCloud? And that same thing goes for the AI part. Can you benefit from all the features that we're offering without ServoyCloud?
Yeah, so you don't have to host your application in ServoyCloud to use that. So I want to stress that it is sort of like these other identity access management platforms where you can define your security schema there, your users, your roles, your permissions there, and then you can sort of federate your application security against that, but you can host it wherever you want. So that's possible. One thing one small thing you might have noticed, I didn't demo it, but I mentioned it, is that when you build through ServoyCloud, it'll sync those permissions for you, like, because those permissions are really in your source code, right? So it'll actually pull those out and sync it to your sort of ServoyCloud security schema for you. So it's nice if you're at least building your applications in ServoyCloud, like generating the Docker image or the WAR file. But you don't technically have to do that. You could manually make those, sort of copy those permissions up, and still federate your application. It's totally decoupled, the runtime and the security, and it will stay that way.
Okay, but there are some features that you cannot benefit from.
Just the syncing. It's like it's not an application feature. It's more of just like a convenience for the developer, and assuring that what you did in source matches what's available in runtime.
Okay. Then we have, let's see, I think this is the last one. You mentioned that the smart client and the web client will be deprecated. What about the NG1?
NG1 for now is still shipped, and will still run. At some point we probably want to remove the sources. The important thing to know about NG1 is that it's based on Angular JS, which is deprecated, right? So you're already running, and Servoy offered for a couple years an LTS version of that was supported by a third party company, an LTS version of Angular JS. But if you run NG1 today, you're already kind of technically running unsupported software, in the sense that Angular JS itself is deprecated, and we no longer issue that long-term support contract on that. So as far as like it being something that will run, I don't think we'll be removing the source, for NG1 for a while, because I think some people are still working on their migration. But it's already been also for a while. We announced a while back that it's in hibernation mode. So if you see a bug fix on a component, for example, it's fixed in Titanium. It's not fixed in NG1, right? And that's been the case already for a while.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that is the questions that we'll handle for now. One last note is that Johan let us know that he is using GitHub Copilot to develop the Servoy platform. So I think the AI is being used to develop our platform already. That's good to know. Thanks, Johan.
And I'm happy Johan watches our webinars too.
Yeah, of course. He needs to know if we are telling the right things.
Okay, well, thank you all.
Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks everyone for answering the poll. The results are very useful. Our apologies for going over time. We'll work on that for the next one. Everyone likes a sharp time box.
I can't make any promises, sorry.
No, I think we had a lot of great content this time, and a lot of promising things that you showed. And then we'll hope to see everyone in the next product release webinar, right?
Yeah, in next quarter.
All right. Then thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you the next time.
Okay, bye for now.